Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 10 o'clock here in Calgary, Alberta, and Thursday night, March the 10th. I'm glad to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is up to us. 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast, from blogtalkradio.com. I'm glad to be here and to be able to do these shows. I thank everybody who's tuning in. You know, I've got 23,300 shows listened to, and I just appreciate everybody who's taken the time to tune into my shows. Thank you very much. And last Tuesday night, we were talking about profiles of pedophiles. Who are pedophiles, and what are their characteristics and profile, and sort of how they actually get a hold of children and whatnot. And that's a very interesting article, and I got a lot out of it, and I hope everybody else did too. I found these articles just by searching around on the internet and looking into profiles of pedophiles, right? And so I want to continue on with that article, and then there's another section of it which is preventing child molestation. So it's actually part of that website's articles. So this is some good information. I hope everybody will go and check this out, especially parents. If you have children, it's really important to know and understand, how to protect your child so that they do not become a victim of a child sexual predator or pedophile. And many people think that would be a stranger, but it could be somebody within your own home. That's the sad part, or within your own family, or somebody that you know and trust, family friend, or a neighbor, or somebody who offers to babysit your children, or the daycare worker, or the teacher, or the coach. That's the sad part, is that child sexual predators are not people who lurk around in dark alleys with black hats on and trench coats looking scary. These are people that look like everybody else. They drive cars, they work usually. They usually are pretty well liked in society and pretty well known, and that's how they get a hold of children, and that's how they get a hold of you in order to get a hold of your children, is to weasel their way into families. And daycare workers, doctors, anyone can be a child sexual predator or pedophile, right? And so it's important to realize, how that this could be anybody, and you do need to learn how to protect your children, and so that they are not victimized. You know what I mean? Because this is horrible. And 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys, pretty much that's the stats. 1 in 3 to 4 girls, 1 in 6 to 7 boys, depending on where you look at the information, will be sexually abused in some way under the age of 18. So whether that's unwanted sexual touching, molestation, exploitation, rape, you name it. I say this almost in every show, but that's because it's so important for people to realize that this is the truth. And it's absolutely horrific. And when you think about how many survivors there are out there, this is ridiculous. This should never be happening. Children's bodies belong to them. And nobody should be wanting to sexually abuse or sexually use a child or hurt a child in any manner. And I don't mind standing up and saying it. So, this is so important for parents to realize this is happening, whether you want to believe it or not. And so many people like to turn a blind eye because they think, it would never happen in my home. It would never happen in my street. It would never happen in my community. Well, it does. And sadly enough, that's how many children are being abused out there. It's ridiculous. And not one should ever have to go through that. You know what I mean? So I hope the parents will get the information and learn how to protect your family, learn how to protect yourself and your children. It's just absolutely crazy. So I'm not a counselor or therapist or anything like that. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows. I just believe in standing up and speaking out against what is not right, and so I'm just a voice out here to speak out against human rights abuses, child abuse, just standing up for child rights. And I'm not ashamed to talk about this stuff. We're afraid to talk about it because we need to talk about it. This needs to be talked about all the time if we're going to stop it, And so, you have to listen at your own discretion. I'm talking about abuse, and abuse is a sensitive topic, and I say this on every show. It is your discretion to listen to my shows. You have the option to turn it off, and, if you find the topics what might make you uncomfortable, you have to know what's good for you to listen to. It is ultimately your decision, so you make the right decision for yourself. And young people under the age of 18, you have someone listen to the show with you, and you should have permission to listen to my shows, because young people, you need to protect yourself. You need to learn how to protect yourself online. And you need to know, what's good for you to listen to and what's not. And if, young people should have permission to listen to my show. And the reason I say that is because, there's adult content on my shows, adult material, and I don't know how young the people are who are listening, right? So it's very important that you get an adult parent, one of your parents, mom or dad, or caregiver, somebody who who you trust and who has a good head on their shoulders, who's an adult who can help you make a decision whether you should be listening, right? Because just not sure how young the people are that are listening to my shows, right? So thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll get right into the show here, and I'll give you the actual links to where this information came from, and I'll pop that into the chat room. This was called The Profile of a Pedophile: Identifying Characteristics and Behaviors of Child Molesters by Lynn Burress. Lynn, L-I-N, and Burress, B-U-R-R-E-S-S. And this was posted April 14th, 2008. But it's really good information. I hope everybody will check it out. And there's more to it. We didn't get to finish up on Tuesday night, so that's why I want to continue on taking a look at this, because this is some really good information. And it's, really good for parents to know this stuff. If you're a parent, to know how to protect your child, there's lots of information out there that will give you tips on, what to look for and signs and symptoms, and how to notice behaviors in your child that, that you should tell your children to come, and they should be able to talk to you about anything. And if somebody tries to touch them or is doing something that, that the child thinks is inappropriate and doesn't like and makes them uncomfortable, they wouldn't know what inappropriate is. But if it makes them uncomfortable and, it doesn't seem right, then they should be able to come to you or tell any adult and get some help. Very important for parents to realize this. So they went on to talk about, in this article, Lynn Burress, she went on to talk, or whoever Lynn Burress is, went on to talk about the lures, how child molesters lure children. And from this article, child molesters are professional con artists manipulating children with various grooming methods in order to create a special bond of warmth and trust. And this may involve lavish attention and gifts, money, alcohol, or drugs, playful touching or tickling, all in an effort to create an atmosphere of secret keeping. It is important to note that most victims of child sexual abuse do not tell they were sexually abused, even when directly asked by a parent or other authority figures. And many times they will not say anything. They will be told to keep it a secret. The child sexual predator or whoever is abusing them sexually will say, this will be our little secret. It's a game. They'll make it into a game. If the child's young enough, and they'll turn it into a game, and the child will not know it's different. And if they say, this is our secret game, it's our special thing, don't tell anybody, the child will not tell anybody. And quite often they won't. You know what I mean? It's horrific, and they may be threatened. That's another issue, is that they may be told, if you tell, it'll be all your fault, and your mom and dad or your mom will be mad at you, and they'll get rid of you, and they'll throw you out. They'll use any number of lies to tell the child, scary things to make the child not tell, And so any number of this stuff could happen, and that's why many children don't disclose, or out of fear and shame sometimes, right? Different, especially if they're older. The older the child is, the more they're cognizant of that something's not right, and may blame themselves. They may feel that it was their fault. They may be told that it was their fault by the person who's abusing them. They might say, "Now this is all your fault. You caused this, and so if you tell, the blame is all gonna be put on you." So there's many reasons why children don't tell and do not disclose abuse, right? And they said here, pedophiles are extremely difficult to detect and can be found in the most unlikely places, making it imperative that parents provide children with the tools to recognize and avoid potentially abusive individuals and situations. So they said parents must be extremely vigilant in teaching children about good touch versus bad touch, recognize and identify the signs and symptoms of child sexual abuse, and closely monitor children's activities while online and offline. And single-parent homes are especially vulnerable, as the parent is trying to fulfill the role of a two-parent home, usually having a full-time job and trying to run a household on their own. So that's really hard and difficult on a single parent, who's trying to run a home and raise children and keep the whole thing going. And it's hard enough for two parents, let alone one. So it's just that much more. The child's just that much more at risk. They said what parents can do to protect children. They said good communication is the single most effective way of protecting children from becoming sexually victimized. Children need to be taught the proper and correct words for body parts, as well as the correct term, sexual abuse. Otherwise, how will the children know how to tell parents that they were sexually abused? And they said if you suspect or are told your child has been sexually abused, immediately contact Child Help. That's just one. There's many, many places you can call, but Child Help is one, and that's 1-800-4-A-CHILD, and that's really easy to remember, 1-800-4-A-CHILD, or your local police department. So you want to get help, right, for your child, and if you suspect a child's being abused, you want to do the right thing and get that child some help, right? And this next portion, that article and This next one I want to talk about is the same website from www.sweet101.com. The other article came from as well, www.sweet101.com. And this is called Child Molestation Prevention by Lynn Burris, written by the same person, March 2nd, 2008. And I'm just going to make sure I put these in the chat room here so people will have this, so you can read along with me if you'd like. And sweet101.com, that's where this comes from. And child molestation prevention, signs and symptoms of child sexual abuse. So this was posted March 2nd, 2008 by Lynn Burris, Burris, B-U-R-R-E-S-S. And they said, identify the signs and symptoms of most child sexual abuse cases in order to protect your children from the long-term effects of falling victim to a child molester, right? So the signs and symptoms of child sexual abuse must be carefully identified. The abuse stopped with professional counseling provided for the child in order to offset long-term emotional and psychological effects of having been abused. So whoever this Lynn Burris is, says child sexual abuse statistics. Reported cases of child sexual abuse in the United States are estimated at 80,000 children each year. According to federal statistics, 1 in 3 girls will be sexually abused before she reaches the age of 18. 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused before the age of 18. And fewer than 1 in 10 of these children will report the abuse. And most of these children will carry the emotional scars and guilt of abuse for the rest of their lives. And many, especially men, will sexually abuse others as adults. But women do too. So a lot of people think it's only men that sexually abuse children, and that's not true. Women are also sexual predators, child sexual predators as well. And they said, what is child sexual abuse? They said sexual abuse can be any sexual act performed with a child, to a child, or in the presence of a child for the sexual gratification of another, ranging from unwanted touching, kissing, to sexual intercourse. It can also involve solicitation, pornography, forcing, tickling, bribing, threatening, online enticements, or pressuring a child into sexual activity. I was sexually abused, so I know, what this is all about. I was sexually abused by my brother, and then some of my brother's friends, 2 to be exact, also sexually molested me, and I did not know to say no. I didn't know that my body belonged to me. I grew up in an abusive home. Sexual abuse was rampant in my home, and so no one's body belonged to them in my home. You know what I mean? And we did not have the right to say no. Don't do this to me, or don't touch me, or no, I don't like that, or you know what I mean. We were just being abused anyway all the time by everyone in the home. My parents were very abusive and violent, and there was a sexual abuse going on between those two. And so, as a child growing up, being sexually abused by my brother at the age of 8, that I can remember. I don't know if there was any earlier instances of that. I just remember when I was 8 years old, and the reason I know is because I know what house we were living in at the time, and I remember we had just moved into this home when this happened, and that's why I know how old I was, right? But prior to that, I'm not sure, you know what I mean? Like, I may have blocks of memories, I just don't know. And, was it just my one brother, or was it other people as well? I don't know, you know what I mean? But I have clear cognizant memories of sexual abuse that happened to me at the age of 8 years old. And I went to my mother and I told her what was happening. And my mother was my main abuser, a very violent woman who almost killed me a couple of times with a couple of ferocious beatings that I took from her. And so I didn't press it with her. She told me that it was my problem. I was going to have to deal with it. She didn't want to hear any more about it. And I was supposed to just wrap myself up like a mummy when I went to bed to try to keep whoever it was, right, because she knew who it was, from molesting me, right? So the thing is she didn't do anything about it, and so this is just horrific that, I just figured, well, okay, then I guess I have to put up with it. So 4 years later, between the ages of 11 and 12, I'd say, right around 11, 12 years old, because we were still living in that home, I was having to put up with some molestation from my brother's friends of the family. And I didn't know to say no. Of course it bothered me, you know what I mean? I was older then, right? Developing, into a young adult, right? Into a young teen, right? Just pre-teens, prepubescent teen, right? And I was very much, not wanting people to touch my body. I was already being abused anyway, physically and in every other way. Had already been sexually abused by my brother, and then had these other friends of the family, these friends of my brother's that would hang around the house, sexually molesting me. So this is so incredibly wrong, but I didn't know to say no, and of course I wasn't going to tell my mother. She already told me she didn't want to hear about it, and my mother was my main abuser who was beating on me on a regular basis, so I didn't want to push it with her. And so I just took the abuse. And the issue is that so many children will. It's very sad. So so many children will not tell that they're being abused. I mean, I did, and it didn't get me anywhere, so there you go. But I mean, so many children just won't tell, right? Just because they, for whatever reasons, they don't tell. And they do talk about this later on in this act, in that. And they said that signs of sexual abuse, physical evidence of abuse is rare, but may include bladder and urinary infections, scratching and painful genitals, especially during urination. That's what was happening to me, and that's why I told my mother about the abuse. I was in a lot of pain, and it was starting to bother me, so that's why, I mean, the pain was getting to be to the point where it was unbearable, and that's why I told my mother, right? So she didn't care. So, torn, stained, or bloody undergarments is another thing. If you're a parent and you're doing laundry and you notice that your children's undergarments are stained and bloody and torn, you better start checking into things. You know what I mean? But that may not happen. So that's not necessarily going to happen, but it might, and it could, and it's definitely an indicator. And if your child's having bladder infections, urinary infections, scratching and painful, around their genitals, you better be checking this out. And they said, while there is no one behavior that positively indicates a child has been sexually abused, sudden or extreme changes in behavior should be considered as a possible reaction to abuse. And that's a very serious issue, because behaviorally, if you know your child's behaviors and your child all of a sudden their behavior changes and they become aggressive or they become passive, and let's say they used to be passive and all of a sudden they become aggressive and angry, right? Well, that's an issue, right? If your child was very aggressive and all of a sudden becomes passive and is sitting in the corner, doesn't want to talk to anybody, is acting very shy and timid where they didn't used to be that way, you better know something has happened, because children don't just switch behaviors like that for no reason, right? Behavioral issues are, behavioral signs are a really good indicator of the different types of abuse, and it's very important that people know this. The parents know to watch their children's behaviors. I think a lot of times parents don't have the time anymore to watch their children's behaviors because they're working all the time. So the only people seeing their children's behaviors are the teachers and the people that are looking out for their children after school, or daycare sitters and whatnot, right? Because parents are so busy they don't even know their children. I don't know how you could when you're working 10 hours a day or 8 hours a day, and you have to get your kids off to school, and then you come home, you make a little bit of supper, put the kids to bed. How do you even know your child? How do you even know their behaviors? You know what I mean? It's a real shame. It's sad that the family system's gone this way. It's nobody's fault. It's just a stupid way it's been set up for us. And, it's really pathetic. But you can definitely learn how to protect your children, and that is to, make sure that you know who your child is with, and make sure that you know that the people that are looking after your children while you're working are who they say they are, and that they are not child sexual predators and pedophiles. Very important to do a background check on anyone who's going to have anything to do with your child. It's worth it. It's worth the amount of money it takes to do those background checks. And I know if I was a parent, I would, because you can't trust anybody. Teachers, coaches, daycare workers, doctors, dentists. I mean, we're talking anybody, who possibly can have access to your child can sexually abuse your child. So it's very important to know, and family members. You can't trust your own family, that's for sure. People think, oh, well, I can trust my own family. Well, are you sure about that? 90 to 95% of abuse happens within the home. That's something that people don't even want to hear. You know what I mean? Like they don't even want to believe it. It's like, what? No. It's like, oh, yes, that's the truth. 90 to 95% of abuse happens within the home, and it's somebody that the child knows and sometimes trusts, right? So whether it's a family member, family friend, who gets access and has access to that child, that's where the abuse is happening. So, very sad, very true. They said the following are behavior changes that may occur in children who have been sexually abused. Fear or dislike of certain people or places, that's a huge issue. If your child used to like to go to the babysitters, but all of a sudden, my good friend here, Gypsy Witch, hello, I'm glad that you could be here. And if all of a sudden they don't want to go to the babysitters, and they're like crying and upset and scared, and you're like, and you're trying to get to work, so you're trying to get your kid over to the babysitters, and you're like, come on, you're going anyway, and you don't care that the child's upset, and you're just thinking that the child is throwing a fit, because they don't want to go that day or something. You better kind of be aware that children don't just do stuff like that for no reason. That there's something probably has happened or gone on that they were uncomfortable with, or something happened that would cause them to be that way, right? Or maybe they just don't like certain people. Maybe somebody comes around that the child that's always wanting to touch or hug the child, and the child feels uncomfortable, doesn't want to hug or touch them. A lot of times people are like, oh no, give your uncle so-and-so a kiss. or you have to give grandma so and so a kiss, right? And they force the child to kiss and hug these people, which is incredibly wrong. It's not a good thing to do, and I don't know why people insist on doing that. It's for their own glorification or gratification or something. But if a child doesn't feel like hugging or kissing somebody, they shouldn't have to. They shouldn't be forced into it, because what happens is the child, if you start doing that with your child, and then later on some sick child sexual predator gets a hold of your child, then the child thinks that they have to go along with whatever that person wants. You know what I mean? So, parents shouldn't do that to their children, right? It's just not a good thing, because there could have been something happen between that adult and that child that you don't even know about, and that's why that child is not wanting to kiss that person or to touch that person, and doesn't want that person to touch them or have anything to do with them. But the family members are all, oh no, kiss Uncle Joe, right? Or kiss Aunt Jane. You know what I mean? Because women are sexual abusers too. So it's just important that people know this stuff. Another issue is seductive or sexy behavior towards adults or peers. A lot of times people promote that with their children. It always makes me really sick to my stomach. Children are not really, why should a child know about adult sexuality? Children should be allowed to explore their own sexuality on their, in their own way, on their own, at their own pace, with their own peers, and they shouldn't be encouraged to be like adult sex machines or something, right? I mean, I see this stuff out here. I see this beauty queen stuff going on. You know what? I don't care. This is my show, and I'm allowed to say whatever I want. I don't like all that stuff where parents are trying to promote their kids to look like these 20-year-old Barbie dolls, sex toys, right? Sex kittens, right? It just makes me sick, and I don't think it's funny. And when I see people doing that, I mean, what can you do, right? Parents are parents. But the thing is you're setting your child up to be something that possibly a predator or pedophile would love to get a hold of. It's like eye candy for them, you know what I mean? It's like, wow, look at that, And what it does is it promotes sexuality with children. It promotes adult sex relationships with children. That's why it's really wrong. I don't agree with it at all. And I think that children should be allowed to be children, and they should be allowed to grow up and be a child as long as they need to be a child. And that when they're ready to explore their own sexuality and grow up and mature, with people their own age and their own peers, their own age group, then that's just natural, that's normal, But just encouraging your child to act older, to act sexy, to why that's a problem, because if you've never done that as a parent and your child starts mimicking adult sexuality, like starts doing things that they should never and should not know about, that they may have seen something they shouldn't have seen, they may have been involved in something that they shouldn't have been involved in, and a lot of parents just think it's cute and they promote it, but actually it's very disgusting to me, because that's what child pornography is all about, and I just can't condone that, right? So I don't stand up for it. I don't condone it at all. Another issue is problems in school, poor grades. Kids who are being sexually abused probably will have problems in school, poor grades. They might not. One of my friends was being raped by her father, and all the way through high school, and I found out, of course, after. But I knew something was wrong with her, but she was a straight A student. She would have straight A's all the time. She was going to go into college, university. She went to Berkeley. She was going to be a civil engineer, and she knew exactly what she wanted to do. So she was she was a brain for sure. She was very smart. But I found out after graduation that she had been being raped by her father on a repeated basis all the way through high school. I knew this girl all the way through high school and didn't realize that this was happening. But I knew something was wrong because I could tell she wasn't always in the greatest shape coming to school. She didn't look that well sometimes, you know what I mean? So I didn't know what her family issues were, and she never told me until after we graduated. But she knew mine because my friends that were close to me knew about the abuse in my home, and it took her all the way through high school to tell me that she was being raped by her father. Absolutely horrible, horrific. So she's not a good, she's an example where somebody went the other way. She did so well in school to try to make up for what was going on in her life, and I think because she wanted to go, she was trying to protect her younger siblings. So I think her main goal was to get a really good job, go to school, get a really good job, go to university, and then be able to take over the care of her younger siblings. I'm pretty sure that's why she did that. So it's absolutely horrific, but this is the thing that happens, right? Withdrawal from family, friends, or usual activities. If a child's being, sexually abused, they may withdraw from everything. They may just go, completely introverted and not want to, talk to anyone, not want to have anything to do with anyone, right? Advanced sexual knowledge for the child's age, that's what I was talking about earlier. Knowing things that a child that age or these ages should not know about. Children shouldn't know about adult sex, things that adults know, you know what I mean? And so that's why, it's be careful that your children do not witness, any pornography or things that they shouldn't be seeing, because they have plenty of time to be an adult when they get to be an adult. You know what I mean? A young adult, when they just start exploring and start finding out about their own sexuality, they got lots of time to be an adult. So let a child be a child, right? Regressed behaviors such as bedwetting is another issue. Eating disorders, eating very little or excessive eating, right? Compulsive eating issues, right? Hostility or aggressive behaviors, behavioral issues. Drug or alcohol problems is another issue. Suicidal thoughts or attempts, and it's just horrific. What this does to children, right? And what it can do. It doesn't affect all children all the same way. It depends on the severity. It depends on the situation for each child. It depends on the resilience of the child, right? So many people, everybody's different, right? But the thing is it will affect them in one way or another, right? They said, why don't children tell? Most children don't tell, even if they've been asked, refuse to talk about it or deny that something happened because, and this is what Lynn Burris said here, they're too young to put what has happened into words. Because they were threatened or bribed by the user to keep the abuse a secret. They fear that they will be taken away from their family. That's a big issue for children who are abused. Even if the family is abusive, they don't, if that's all they know, and that's still their family. You know what I mean? And so that's the thought that, but I don't want to be taken away from my family. You know what I mean? Like that's a huge issue for kids, right? But the thing is that you got to get the child some help. So, whatever that child deserves to not be abused, you know what I mean? So you have to get the child some help, even if they don't want it, you know what I mean? Because so many times children will not want that, you know what I mean? So they won't want to get help because they don't want to be ripped away from their family. But sadly enough, then the abuse just continues on, and they're just, later on, they pay for that, you know what I mean? It's horrible. They may tell because they're afraid that no one will believe them. They may not tell because the abuser promised gifts or awards for keeping the secret. They may blame themselves or believe the abuse is punishment for being bad, and they may have even been told that, right? So they may start to believe it, right? They may feel too ashamed or embarrassed to tell, right? And they may worry about getting into trouble, getting a loved one into trouble. That's a big issue. Many times children will not tell about the abuse because they don't want their mom or dad to go to jail. They don't want a family member to go to jail. Right? And even the abuser will tell them, if you tell, I'll end up going to prison, and it'll just ruin the family. It'll be all your fault. And so the guilt trip is laid on the child, right? They said what parents can do to keep children safe. Remember, the person who abuses a child is to blame for the abuse, not the child. That's very important for everybody to know. There are pedophiles and child sexual predators are always trying to blame the child, saying, well, the child wanted it. A 2-week-old baby, people rape their 2-week-old babies, and then they say, well, the baby wanted it. I mean, when people say stuff like that, the judges should add on another 100 years just for that statement. You know what I mean? Like, that's so ignorant, and I don't see how anybody can get away with saying it, but people do, and you see it in the news. What you can do to keep your children safe, always know the people who care for your children, including names, phone numbers, and addresses. You should know these people. If someone's going to watch your child, honest to God, I would have a background check done on them. You know what I mean? If it was my child, I'd make sure they were not already convicted of a prior offense. And I would make sure that they had no prior criminal offenses. You want to know who your child is with, and you want to know who's looking after your child and who they are. Be actively involved, carefully supervising your child's activities. Limit one-on-one child-adult relationships. I think that's a big one, and I know that a lot of websites actually promote that. If you can limit one-on-one adult-child situations where a child is with an adult alone, you can stop about 80%. They say 80 to 90% of child sexual abuse would be stopped, right? So that's another issue. But it's so sad because this should never happen, and there shouldn't be anybody out there sexually using children. That's why this has to stop, right? So do whatever you can, in your own capacity. Get involved locally, get involved nationally, but get involved with somebody who's doing some good work out there to help stop child abuse. Because you know what? If we don't stand up and stop this, it's just going to keep on going. It may as well be this generation. Why not? You know what I mean? That's what I say. It should just be this generation. Let's just do it. Why should these children have to keep paying generation after generation after generation just because people don't want to get involved, right? So let's do something about this, and let's all get involved in whatever way we can. Thanks, everybody, for tuning into my show. I appreciate it. And thanks, Gypsy Witch, for being here. I really appreciate that. Just so nice to have you here with me. And that's my good friend from Australia. And so have a great night, everybody. I'll be back on Saturday morning, and and Sunday as well on my weekend shows. You can check that out. And otherwise, we'll see you next week, Tuesday, Thursday. Have a great night. Take good care of yourselves. Bye-bye.